My question for you is, will these grim developments in Afghanistan affect our other worries in Iran and Syria?
What I think we're doing in Syria makes sense. I'd like to see the administration continue imposing stronger sanctions on Syria, trying to get China and Russia to join in those sanctions, build a coalition of the willing on Syria, hasten Assad's departure, perhaps help the Turks, work with the Turks to provide sanctuary and safety for those humanitarian corridors, encourage the Saudis and the Turks to arm some of those rebels. I think that's what we can do. Iran is the loser when it comes to Syria, and I think Iran right now is feeling the enormous heat from the sanctions that we've put on them, the energy sanctions, the economic sanctions. So I say let diplomacy, let sanctions work before we talk about any military options and strikes on Iran. That's what I would do right now.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, not that anyone asked me, Mr. Ambassador, but the grim turn of events in Afghanistan shows how difficult it is to intervene militarily and to make a successful diplomatic conclusion out of a military involvement. Alireza Jafarzadeh, author of The Iran Threat, President Ahmadinejad and the Coming Nuclear Crisis, do you fear that the Afghanistan mess will affect, going forward, our Iranian policy?
It could definitely have a negative impact there. I think this is obviously a very appalling, tragic event today. But I think this is an added reason why you want to avoid presence in other countries as much as you can.
A presence of the military, you mean?
Exactly, yes.
And so where do we go? Do you agree with Ambassador Richardson that sanctions are the way?
I think when it comes to Iran, as Mr. Ambassador said, you definitely want to use all the resources you have available to you in terms of sanctions, in terms of all kinds of political pressure. But at the end of the day, looking at the trend that we've seen over the past decade alone, there's not a promising outcome. Tehran has continued to defy the international community. They continue to enrich uranium. They continue to support all these terrorist groups in the region and also in Iraq, and they continue to suppress their own population. So what you want to do, you want to empower the opposition. This is the very same opposition, the MEK. They expose all the major nuclear sites of Iran. They've been instrumental in the uprising in Iran, and unfortunately the State Department continues to maintain them on the terrorist list, defying the court's order to complete this review and delist them. So that's I think the way to go, rather than just jumping to a military option or just continue fruitless negotiations.
Mr. Ambassador, a final question to you. You've heard John McCain suggest that we get our air power involved in Syria. The president then chastised not Senator McCain by name, but all those who would encourage the rapid deployment of military forces to resolve this crisis. Who's right? Is it Senator McCain and those who advocate the United States using its muscle to resolve these crises, or the president urging restraint right now?
Well, I believe the president makes more sense. What we want to do, and by the way, this gentleman that just spoke, I think, made a lot of sense, embolden people power in Iran, which is what we want to happen in Syria. But I think that right now, the Syrian people don't want a military intervention. Where the U.S. can be helpful is to work with Turkey, to work with other nations, neighboring nations, to put forth a humanitarian corridor so those refugees can move out, to encourage perhaps the Saudis and the Turks to arm the rebels. That's where we can be helpful. I think a military intervention in Syria doesn't make sense. The Syrian people don't want it. The situation is very explosive. I think what you're seeing is Syria and Iran weakening, the twins weakening, and it's going to be people power eventually that change the dynamic, that are the game changers towards more democracy and an end to the suppression in both countries.
Ambassador Bill Richardson, Alireza Jafarzadeh, thank you, gentlemen, both.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure.